Firstly today, the UK's energy crisis is set to worsen the country's cost of living crisis. With the winter a few months away and an energy price increase due in October, inflation levels might break records. Financial experts at US-based Citibank predict the country's inflation levels could reach 18% in January next year. The last time the UK's consumer inflation crossed the 18% mark was in 1976. The figure is far higher than the Bank of England's target. It also correlates with predictions from other firms like EY and Goldman Sachs, which say that inflation will reach at least 15%. In early August, the UK's central bank warned that inflation levels will hit 13% in October this year. For June, the UK reported 10.1% inflation, the highest in 40 years. And that figure has been triggered by the global energy price rise, a fallout from the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, energy companies have scaled up their regular exercises, preparing for possible gas shortages coming this winter. The annual drill will see potential scenarios including rationing electricity in war games over 4 days, rather than the usual 2, as energy concerns grow. Now, in other developments, the Office for National Statistics has revised its 2020 contraction figure from 9% to 11%. This surpasses the contractions caused by the World Wars and is the worst since the year 1709. The ONS will publish growth figures for 2021 and the first half of 2022 on September 30. Well, joining us now for more on this is WION's London correspondent Alex Isaac. Alex, thanks for joining us. The October gas price cap should be announced this week. How will it add to the woes of a lot of people who are already struggling with the high cost of living across the UK?
Well, we're seeing higher energy bills, we're seeing higher fuel, we're seeing high price costs across the market. Nothing is really coming down. And this new information suggests that we're going to see £1,700 annually on top of our bills. And that's not including food or fuel. And there is real concern generally around the public. There's a lot of doom mongering out there. There's a lot of talk about potential rolling blackouts and potential financial crisis for your average person. But they're also seeing that there's huge profit from producers as well. And today, there's been a lot of predictions about what the inflation might end up being. But retailers, energy retailers, are asking for a tariff deficit fund, which would freeze the price of the energy right now, and we can pay it back when the prices are a bit lower. But ultimately, what's going to happen is that people's mental health is likely to be suffering as well as their pockets, as they're seeing all of these concerns about the future.
And Alex, it's really a tightrope for the government right now. Do they cut taxes or do they not cut taxes? What are the options for whoever moves into number 10 Downing Street in early September?
In the last 2 weeks, we've seen a huge emergency, and it's getting worse by the day. And many people are asking for something to be done right now by the government and not wait until September 5th, until the Prime Minister is named. But it doesn't look like we're going to be making any of those changes. There is a real crisis brewing, and whether Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss gets into that seat, they're going to have to make changes quickly. But right now, they're also battling it out still. They've got another hustings later. Rishi Sunak is saying that Liz Truss and her campaign to cut taxes isn't going to be beneficial for the crisis in the future. But his long-term plans include paying back a lot of that money that was put out through COVID. So whichever way we're facing it, again, it's going to be the average person that's going to be hit the hardest.
And then, Alex, just finally, the Bank of England has warned of a recession by the end of this year. Is the UK really on track for that as it stands?
You're right there. The Bank of England does say that there is going to be a recession by the end of the year, and many experts are also suggesting this is going to be the case. But the predictions have been constant, especially today. We've seen predictions from every single bank and financial analyst that are suggesting high rates of inflation. We don't actually know just yet. Liz Truss herself is actually quite positive. She said that the recession is not inevitable. But that will obviously just depend on what happens on Friday with that price cap comes in, and what also the potential Prime Minister is also going to do. But it could well be that a lot of households will have that financial breaking point, and the £37 billion that has been put aside to help those lower incomes and disability families may actually, we need more of that to help a lot more families that may end up feeling the pinch.
Alex, thanks so much for your insights there. Now, for more on this story, we're being joined by Mark Brolin from London. He's an economist and an author. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Firstly, how serious is this for the UK? And comparing it to the likes of the Eurozone and the US, how difficult a situation really is this for the government?
Well, it's certainly a difficult situation. Everything you said before is certainly true. But there is, the situation is also a bit strange because there is also a mixed picture. There are some positives. The unemployment rates are quite low. FTSE 100 has regained lots of the decline in March and then again another dip in July. Housing prices are, at least for now, holding up. So it's a very strange analytical situation. You asked about the other nations. Compared to Switzerland. Switzerland is famously doing quite well here. They have 3.6 or something like that inflation rate, just because they are not as dependent on. They are less energy dependent. But compared to the Eurozone, UK is for now doing about as badly. The US seems to be possibly, according to latest July figures, possibly they have already peaked, but we don't know that yet. But the situation in Europe is quite similar at the moment.
And we mentioned it earlier on about the war in Ukraine and the impact that that's had on countries all over the world economically. Specifically, how has it impacted the UK economically in terms of, gas supply and energy supply? What is the real financial impact been on the UK because of that?
Well, it has had a massive impact, of course, especially short term. But what we can see in this respect is that, the inflation has lots of components. Often we talk too much about the energy and food prices going up, and also the supply chain problems we've had since the pandemic era. These two issues are transitionary, so things might ease after winter, and how cold the winter is going to be is also going to be a big factor. But when we talk about inflation, there are also other aspects, like the Chinese economy has slowed down, and the Chinese demand for decades has sort of kept prices down as well. So that also has an impact. And if the Chinese demand continues to be fairly low, this will continue to also affect the inflation issue. Then we have technology development. That might keep going as it has. That also keeps inflation down, has done it in the past. But then we have, of course, the ultra-loose monetary policies for decades now. Those are unprecedented. And those have created asset bubbles, and now the Bank of England is in like central banks across the world, or the developed world. They are in a tight spot because if they raise interest rates too much, they will puncture these asset bubbles, which they possibly should do, but they will not be very inclined to do so.
And just touching on that, how likely could we see the Bank of England continue to raise interest rates? Obviously, we saw it at the start of this month. They warned that there would be a recession at the end of this year. Lots of people are really concerned in London that interest rates will continue to rise. Is that the case, or is that a worry that just isn't realistic?
Well, I think I think it's quite likely that interest rates will rise again, but perhaps not so much as they should have if the only ambition would be to combat inflation. I think they are now, this thing about keeping the recession in check and inflation at the same time, they are sort of contradictory. So I think interest rates will rise, but inflation will rise more than interest rates, and therefore the negative interest rates will be even more negative. So this will be the key issue over the next couple of months. But even if inflation goes up, as it probably will be, I think all these Citibanks and all these forecasts are probably right in the sense, perhaps not the actual numbers, but they're probably right that the inflation will continue to go up. But even if it does so, it will probably take 4, 5, 6 months, and then it will start coming down again. But then we will have a recession. And regarding that, what you said before, I think it's quite likely that there will be a recession. It doesn't have to be a recession. But even if there is a recession, it might not be as far a drop as it was in, for example, 2008. It probably won't be. It might be actually a mild recession this time. So that's at least some sort of silver lining.
Yeah, lots of difficulties for the UK's economy right now. Mark Brolin, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.